Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here, and welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to check out a plugin called Xenon from PSP. So firstly, if you are new to my channel and you like what you see, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So PSP, a plugin manufacturer, have plenty of plugins on offer, and I'm trying a few of their plugins out at the moment. And Xenon, not exactly sure how you say it, but it's, anyway, look at the title for the spelling, is a very high detailed mastering style limiter. So it offers a great amount of features, and if you're looking for a mastering limiter, then definitely check this one out. And without further ado, let's just get into it and check it out. Okay, so here we are in Cubase, and we have the PSP Xenon or Xeon, or I'm not exactly sure how you say it. It starts with an X, but I'm going to go with Xeon. That's what I'm going to say, so we're going to stick with that. And this is a mastering limiter that is very clean, very precise, very detailed. I don't know, what do you want to say? There's lots of things in here that I will admit go above my head. So if you are somebody that needs a lot of what this is offering, please check it out for yourself. We're going to run through the features and, out of the manual. And some of it I may not understand, some of it I won't know how to use it, because this is a very detailed plugin, very extreme, and the subtleties of this we may not even hear. So I will read a lot of the stuff out of the manual here so you can get an understanding of what they are trying to achieve with it, and we will try to demo it as best I can with some exceptions. As I said, we are not going to go into the detail and the quality that this plugin can probably or should be able to represent, because I just don't have that set up to be able to do on YouTube here. And yeah, it's really something you're going to need to try for yourself to see if it's something you need. So the PSP Xenon is a full band dual stage limiter featuring an integrated leveler, advanced K-system metering, and psychoacoustically optimized word length reduction. PSP Xenon offers 64-bit double floating point precision processing throughout its entire signal path and can operate at sample rates up to 192 kHz. Now, as I stated, we will not be pushing those boundaries. We will not be going to anywhere near that. So please be aware of that, because you will need to try it yourself if you want to see how well they operate at that level of detail. The limiter section consists of two processing stages, and I'm hoping that it's going to be obvious that it's broken up as in, say, this is one section and this is the other section, but I guess we'll find out as we go. The first section, I'm assuming is over here, applies initial gain reduction while allowing the transients to exceed the ceiling level, fixed at 0 dBFS. The longer the attack time, the more transients will exceed the ceiling level. This stage uses multiple infinite impulse response IIR higher order filters for intelligent adaptive envelope extraction to ensure low aliasing and intermodulation distortion. This section uses only a small amount of look ahead. Well, that's a mouthful, and whoosh, straight over my head, most of that. So sorry, I'm not going to explain that to you because I don't get it myself. And this is why I am reading a lot of this out of the manual. So if you're a very intelligent person who understands all of this, then you may exactly know what I just said, and you can go forward with that. The transients which pass through the first stage are then subject to passing by the second stage of the limiter section. This stage provides fail-safe brick wall limiting by using look-ahead processing, in conjunction with sophisticated finite impulse response, FIR, based envelope detectors. By using FIR-based filters for the second stage, this guarantees that every single transient will be detected and caught. This two-stage operation results in much greater control over how the transients are affected than in traditional second-stage limiters. So the theory is that the first stage allows the transients to go through, so it's doing some limiting, but allows a certain amount of transients to go over the ceiling to get them through, keeping, I guess, the audio cleaner, not squashing it so much. And then the second stage actually then prevents those transients going any further. Again, I'm assuming it's to get maximum amount of limiter function without adding too much distortion and noise. Finally, if that wasn't enough, the limiter envelope detector can be oversampled to automatically prevent intersample peaks introduced by the reconstructed filter at the digital to analog converter. This way, an engineer will not need to lower the output level of the entire signal anymore. PSP Xenon's envelope detector does it automatically whenever required. The result, greater loudness at reduced distortion. So with a lot of limiting plugins, it is common practice for you to set your ceiling lower than 0 because intersample peaks are quite common, especially when you limit audio quite heavily. What happens is the conversion between digital and analog requires that when you convert back to analog, if your digital is squashing at 0, when it recreates that sine wave sort of look, the peak of that audio, that sine wave, will actually go over 0. So a plugin that has intersample peak detection or some sort of method in there will actually make sure that when that analog is when that digital is converted to analog, that it makes sure those peaks stay below 0. So in theory, they're stating that you do not need to set your ceiling lower, because it's quite common for most mastering people these days, anyway, not the ones that crush things, to set their ceiling at anywhere between minus 0.3 dB to minus 1 dB even, if you want to sort of sit around that mastered for iTunes sort of range. Minus 1 dB is quite common. They're stating that you don't need to do that with their plugin. You can set your ceiling to 0 and you will not have any intersample peaks. There'll be distortion's not going to happen. It's going to be fantastic. Okay, now, if that wasn't enough, they also have an integrated leveler in here. And what they state that the integrated includes an integrated leveler which compensates for volume changes in the program that occur over longer periods of time. To understand how the leveler functions, you need to be aware that the average level and loudness of a given audio signal cannot be increased infinitely for a given release time. There is a threshold dependent on the specific audio material you are limiting, above which increasing the limiter input gain will not result in greater perceived loudness. Instead, the limiter will start to pump heavily whenever it recovers from moments of deep gain reduction. In this situation, there is nothing gained by increasing the input level above that threshold. However, sometimes program material consists of dynamically louder and quieter parts. If the limiting parameters were set for the quiet passages, when the louder parts occur, the artifacts mentioned previously will become very apparent. The PSP Xenon leveler applies a relatively constant, slow-changing gain reduction to loud passages before the limiting is applied. This is particularly useful for loudness maximization applications in which the goal is to make each part of the song sound as less as possible. For traditional limiting of short peaks without clipping, the leveler can be turned off, thereby preserving the original macro dynamics of the program. Okay, so I'm assuming from that this integrated leveler is attempting to make your song a bit more level across the board. So if you have loud choruses
very quiet verses, that sort of stuff, that it's going to adjust itself to a point to try and bring up those quieter parts and, bring down the louder parts and make them a little bit more level. Obviously, you still want dynamics. You do not want to obviously flatline the whole thing, because that would just take away the entire impact of the song. But obviously it has some sort of method to try and do that to a point. All right, then we have a whole thing about meters. It talks about the default is for the meters show the peak level of the input and output signal as well as the gain reduction. So this is obviously the attenuation. Here's our input output. So by default, it's showing the peak level. So they have also implemented a K-System mastering meter system into the plugin. The K-System metering measures both average RMS and peak levels. 3 different K-System scales, K12, K14, K20 are available. Scales differ by the amount of headroom and were carefully chosen to help engineers. K12 is designed for mastering audio for broadcasting purposes. K14 is intended for typical CD production, and K20 is optimized for movie production. So we're not going to go into the K-System here, but just be aware that it is obviously there, and we can turn it on and off to change our meters to reflect that. The K-System was developed by Bob Katz, a famous mastering engineer who came up with this idea. It's a little bit similar to the standard or the standard or newer standard of loudness measuring with the, LUFS, LUFS, and that sort of stuff. Not exactly the same, but, it's in the similar sort of ballpark there. All right, there's a lot more stuff in here. This is such a detailed plugin. So to get started here, they actually have a quick start in the manual, which is really good. So we can actually just try something out. So let's just follow the quick start. All right, let's just follow it. So you're supposed to play back your song and you dial in the in knob, drive in the limiter until you get a solid signal coming into the plugin. It's definitely driving the limiter. We are getting some gain reduction. So after you do that, you then adjust the transient knob to set the attack time and the amount of transients passed to the second processing stage. Not exactly sure how you tell how much is getting to the second stage there. Setting it to 100% seems to be the cleanest when, I'm hitting that quite hard just to get some impact there. We'll dial that back down a bit. Okay, then choose to desired transients processing, react, or any of the 2 predict modes. So this is ABC, so we're in react mode. Adjust the release knob to set the perceived loudness and find the balance between loudness and distortion. That's distorting, and that obviously loses loudness. Okay, then we set the leveler knob. Okay, over here, set the leveler knob to reduce pumping artifacts if there are present. I don't really hear any. Then you set the out knob to the desired output ceiling. So you can obviously turn it down extremely so that we do not get our ceiling. Set it to -12. We are setting our ceiling to -12, so we're really low. 0, we're flatlining at 0 there. Now, in theory, you're supposed to be able to set it to 0 because that's what they state. And that's the quick start. So that's what they state to do. And just, there you go, you've done it. So let's run through the actual settings, though, because obviously we don't really understand what they're all doing. Okay, so up the top here, we have some detector buttons. This little section here, and they're both turned off at the moment. So what we've got is they control the envelope detector block settings. So order, which is this one here. When this button is clicked on, the envelope detector uses second order filters. This results in a slightly different release shape for the envelope detector. Also, this might result in less aliasing. However, the Xenon's envelope detector yields extremely little aliasing anyway, so any difference in aliasing will be hardly perceivable. Yep, you probably need better ears than me to hear that. Okay, the other button here is the oversample. The button controls the option to oversample the envelope detector. Engage this option to automatically compensate for true peaks. Low sample rates losses true peaks information, so they require a need to detect intersample peaks. Oversampling algorithm developed was suggested by ITUT standards. Keep in mind, though, also, I am doing this with headphones on, so I'm not getting the level of detail I would get from my studio monitors. But again, I'm not hearing a major difference there. But, we are talking extreme settings here for mastering quality. Right, we have our transient buttons here. Okay, we have react. This setting hard clips the transients. It results in the most obvious transient distortion, but for some program material, that may be just what you're looking for. Predict. Both of these settings use the FIR-based envelope detectors with look ahead to smoothly catch transients and limit their react level. So I guess in our case, if we were trying to go for the cleanest possible signal, then we would be looking for B or C and not A. And the little key code there says that, what does it say? A is hard limiting, B is medium limiting with look ahead algorithm, and C is soft limiting with look ahead algorithm. So C would be the gentlest. So let's go over to C anyway. Okay, we've got our transient knob, which was this control here. This knob adjusts the attack time of the first stage of limiting, effectively controlling how much of the transient will be passed to the second limiter stage. Low values reduce distortion but may significantly soften the transient. High values typically increase the distortion of the transients, but the clarity of the transients may also be much greater. Just going to over limit a bit just to get more impact. I'm noticing the kick coming through a lot more when I set that up to 100%. Okay, the release knob determines the release time for the first stage of limiting. Lower values result in a higher perceived loudness level at the cost of distorting the audio signal. Higher values reduce the perceived loudness level but maintain the clarity of the audio signal. And we did hear that. Now you can hear there's lots of crunchy distortion on that one. A lot less volume, a lot cleaner though. Louder, crunchy as heck. Okay, the in knob adjusts the input level of the audio signal, which effectively determines the amount of limiting applied. Higher settings of this knob will pre-amplify the input signal before it is sent to the limiter, while lower settings will attenuate the signal. So, obviously we are boosting our audio signal up or down, and that's going to drive the plugin harder or softer. That's why I set it to overdo it, just so we can hear this a little bit better. Some people don't like when I do that in plugin examples, but sometimes it will be very hard to hear some of these differences. And if you want to demonstrate what the potential is there, sometimes you have to push these things a bit harder just to throw the demonstration off a little bit. Obviously, we've got a power button. Pretty obvious what that does. Right, then over here we have word length. Okay, so these buttons configure the word length reduction feature of the plugin whenever This is going to get complicated. Whenever truncation would occur, PSP Xenon applies its high-quality dithering algorithm to keep the perceived dynamic range as close to the original as possible. And then there's a section about requantize for more information on word length and dithering. So quantize activates the word length reduction, and then the bit depth sets the bit depth of the requantized output. So this is basically, so it's just basically dithering, right? So in our case here, if we were going to convert from a 24-bit mixing session, we're mastering and we're going to output it to a CD, then we would turn on the quantize, set it to 16-bit, and we're adding dithering. Okay, we can also adjust the noise shape. So there is select which, if any, of the 6 types of dither noise okay, there we go. So you got A up to F, and obviously off. So as noted, each noise shaping curve is based to some extent on the isophonic curve of the human auditory system, with C being the most faithful curve. If no noise shaping button is selected, plain white noise with triangular PDF is applied. So this is just going to determine our shape. So they're saying C is the most natural. I really doubt you're going to hear what this is doing, but let's just turn it on. We'll set it to C. Okay, so then this other button here is auto block, I assume it is. Activates dithering, auto blacking, auto blacking. The feature which cuts off the dither noise completely when no audio signal silence is present on the requantizer input. When mastering multiple songs in one pass, an album, etc., this feature allows for achieved absolute silence between songs with dither noise could otherwise be audible. It's pretty self-explanatory, so if you were doing a song or an album or something where there is going to be literal true silence in somewhere, you'll want to turn this on so that the dither noise that is added is turned off for those periods of silence, so you don't hear any chance of hearing that sort of sound of dither noise coming through or whatever you've tuned this to. All right, we have our leveler knob. The knob controls the threshold of the leveler. Lower values make its action more obvious. Keep in mind that the time constant of the leveler's envelope detector is very slow. In other words, the leveler's gain reduction will not be immediately apparent upon the signal exceeding the threshold. Rather, once the threshold is exceeded, the leveler will gradually apply gain reduction. The leveler is especially useful for loudness maximization because it can greatly reduce pumping artifacts. When the knob is set fully clockwise, the leveler is off. So obviously we get extremely drop in volume there, but the theory is that it is leveling pretty heavily there. That's off. I mean, we're getting a smoother, cleaner sound. I can hear there. So the link knob here controls the extent to which the first limiting stage gain reduction of the left and right channels are tied together. When set to 100%, the gain reduction applied to both channels is identical. When setting the knob to 0 completely decouples the gain reduction coefficients, and each channel is then processed independently. When the two channels are completely decoupled, PSP Xenon operates as if it were two separate limiters working in parallel, one on each channel, although each shares the same transient release and level settings. When the two channels are decoupled, this normally results in a louder overall output because each channel's level and loudness are maximized separately and optimally for that specific channel. However, one side effect of decoupling the two channels is that the stereo image may fluctuate. Thus, with the plugin, you can use the link knob to dial in the optimal blend between the extra loudness gained by delinking a stereo signal versus stability of the stereo field. So with a limiter compressor, it's obviously listening to the audio to determine when things go across the threshold and you get peaks. Sometimes you'll get peaks that might be in your left channel, but not in your right channel, or right channel, not left, vice versa. Normally, standard compressors that are working in stereo or limiters, when they get a loud signal in either channel, they will actually reduce the volume of the entire song, both left and right channels. And that's what they're stating here. So if you've got it set to 100%, that's exactly what it's going to do. If there's a loud signal come in the left ear, it's still going to bring the right ear down as well. But what that does is even though it negatively impacts the right ear, it keeps the stereo balance of the song consistent and the way it originally was. Alternatively, you can turn it all the way down and decouple it as it states, and if it gets a loud signal in the left ear, it's only going to limit on the left side and not the right side, which they're saying in theory will allow you to have a louder song, but it can impact the stereo field because it can throw the balance off. Things may appear to be moving in the song based on that, but you can obviously balance by going somewhere in between to get the maximum. Let's see if there's any difference with this. you know, it's if it's there, it's pretty subtle, and it's going to depend on the song. Look, you know, each song is going to be different. Depends on the fluctuations between the left and right channels there to what you're going to get out of it. And our out knob here sets basically our output ceiling. They're stating that generally you'll have it set to 0 dB, but if you want to go lower because you're someone that likes going to -1 or -0.3 for safety sakes, then, you know, dial the knob down. Obviously, you can type in your value here if you want to by just clicking in the text field, but they state to set it to 0. And the auto button, this is interesting. Let's see what this one is. For easy doing of the limiter's action is equipped with an auto output mode. When this mode is on, the output is automatically attenuated or amplified to compensate for the input gain as set by the input knob. This makes it possible to compare the original and processed signals at similar loudness levels by switching the bypass button on and off. Okay, so we can, in theory, have it set to auto to, you know, whereas, so in this example here, you can hear an obvious loudness difference. Now, if we turn auto on, in theory, they're stating that you should not hear a difference. Unfortunately, I'm hearing it get lower in volume, which is a little bit annoying because that doesn't quite work for us. So it's not quite working for me in this case here, but maybe that's because I'm going a little bit over the top with our settings. Who knows? All right, so we've got our metering section now, and as I stated, you know, we've got our input here. You can see that's going in the red because we've pushed it pretty hard. If we actually turn the plugin on, that usually helps. We've got our gain reduction, so you can see how much it's reducing our signal, our audio. Pretty extreme, -8 dB. That's really way too much. So we can click on it to reset it. Now the auto is working a lot more efficiently there. So obviously the more extreme you push this, the harder an auto setting works. I've found that with most plugins though. This is not something that is a negative on PSP's plugin, because I find that on most compressor distortion plugins, the harder you use them, the more, you know, the more heavy you hit the compressor or the more distortion you apply, the harder these auto settings have to work it out. They just don't cope. And I usually find in those situations there that I won't use auto, and I'll actually, you know, use the level of the output to get that balance. Obviously in this plugin, that's not really practical because the point of this is not to be adjusting the output level. It's just to be able to hear it. And, you know, so you're not going to want to be turning this down manually to adjust to get the input output the same. I mean, you could for your testing point of view, but obviously when you go to bounce out, you're going to want to set it to your ceiling correctly. So, you know, if the auto setting's not working for you, that's one way around it. But, you know, in this case here, when I dial back the settings and we're getting something a little bit more reasonable, you know, 3 dB, the auto function's working. So if I turn it off, there's obviously an increase. Okay, so we've got some switches here to do with metering, I'm guessing by the stage of this. So 3 switches comprise this section, allow for independent metering of the gain reduction applied by each plugin block. Okay, so limiter 1 is the first limiter stage, main limiter. Limiter 2 here is the second limiter stage, the brick wall transient processing, and then there's the leveler. So I'm assuming when we have them all turned on, that means we are seeing the impact of the entire plugin. That's everything. there's a zoom setting here that selects the attenuation meter range. Okay, so we can change. So we've got 0 to -12 or 0 to -24. So if we want to zoom in theory, we can see a little bit more detail. It's probably I would have that on, because if I'm getting down here to -12, I'd be a little bit concerned. So I'm a bit curious to why they have a -24, because attenuating that much is pretty extreme stuff. So let's just turn all these off. So this is in theory, I mean, if we turn that off, we should see nothing, which we do. So this is how we could have dialed this in before, where it said to set your level of transients that you wanted to have and how much it was being impacted. So if you turn that on, I guess we're seeing the transients that are being reduced. Or, yeah, must be being reduced. Okay, so when I set it to 100%, you can see there's a lot less being reduced there. Set it to 0, a lot more transients are being impacted. And I'm guessing if we push this, we'll start seeing ridiculous transient figures there. So I guess that's how you can dial in this first stage. So you just set it to limiter 1 to see what's happening there. Now we could set it to limiter 2 and see, I guess, what's happening in limiter 2. So that's obviously still going to be impacted by this. So the less transients we let through in the first stage, the less that's going to be impacted in the second stage. Now, we could probably exaggerate that by pulling down our ceiling, because in theory, you would assume that our ceiling would then impact what is happening. Let's just turn the leveler off for a minute as well. So at the moment, you can see there's very little stuff being processed and being pulled down by the second stage. But as I let more transients through, the second stage is becoming more impacted. It's interesting. I would have thought the second stage would be doing more based on the output, but it actually doesn't. Doesn't seem to have any reaction to it whatsoever. So the second stage is just it's doing what it's doing. And then we can look at the leveler. So we can see that we're doing nothing with the level at the moment. So you can see that's pulling it down all the way once I pull it down. But all the way up to here, it's not doing anything. And that's probably because we're not really pumping it. So the more I push this, the more it needs to come in. And it's attempting to try and stop pumping as much. Now, that's obviously a stupid setting to do. So I guess if you wanted to use the leveler, you would look at this, because you need to make sure that it needs to be doing something if you want it to do something. So you might dial it in. Depends how much leveling you want it to do, but if you just set it something sensible. And then I guess you can look at anything in between. So you could look at limiter 1 and 2 together. Leveler with limiter 2, level 1 in the limiter. Not exactly sure why you do those options, but that's a really nice setting to be able to actually judge what each section is doing and dialing them in appropriately. All right, and then we've got some more settings down here. So we've got our mode type here. So we've got peak, which is obviously, so that's our peak meter. We can then move over to our K system meter here, and we can change to, so K12, K14, K20, and you'll see the scale move. So the actual attenuation doesn't move, but our scale moves here, so that if you want to dial in where you're sitting on the K system, so you can see the difference here of our K system setting. So if we wanted 14, and you can see the top level there is plus 14. If we go to 12, it's plus 12. If we go to 20, it's plus 20. So it sort of changes where your red lines are. It's not changing your level of your song. That's up to you to determine that. It's changing the meters so that you can decide where you want the signal to hit based on those settings. So they're saying that CD production should be K12, 14, sorry. Now, I would assume that, does that mean you should be targeting 0 here? And if so, you know, how do you get down there? It's an interesting sort of metering system there. I don't fully understand the K metering system, to be honest with you. Okay, we have a recon button. This oversamples the signal going to the output meters to estimate the intersample peaks. When on, the output meters will attempt to show the signal level after the D to A converter and its reconstruction filters. So I'm just going to switch back to peak for now, and not sure if it's changing these values. So like you got minus 2.3. Minus 2.1 now. So going by this, we're not getting to 0. Is that because of the auto? Hang on. Let's turn the auto setting off, because that's what's throwing our values out. Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize the auto was throwing that off. So the auto is actually throwing off the meters. So we go back to our Ks there, just see if there's anything different. Really. Okay, so without the detection of intersample peaks, our meters are stating that we're hitting 0 dBFS, right? Because we've got it set to 0. That's exactly what it should be doing. It should be limiting to 0 dBFS, and it states that. We turn this on, now it's stating that actually you're going over by 0.3. So I guess if you backed it off, you in theory should. Okay, now we're going below 0, so we're not even actually compressing at all or limiting. So it's representing what is happening in the intersample peak detection there, and how far you're going over. All right, we've also got a post button here. So in theory, we push this up. This should just be switching between pre or post this control. All right, so we have it in. It's pre this control because I've got the volume turned up. You can see that's our audio signal. Post, you can see now we're redlining. So if you just want to see what the signal was before you turned it up, then just flick that button on and then turn it off again. And there is a calibrate button here, which is supposed to activate pink noise generator for the case system speaker calibration. The RMS level of the noise depends on which case system scale is chosen. You can choose to generate pink noise in left, right channels. Is this going to hurt? So if you want to calibrate your speakers, so let's say for instance we want to go to K14, you can see that it's generating pink noise at 0 dB. Oops. You can't turn it off. It's interesting that you got to flick through them. I would have thought a nice on-off button there would be handy. I guess that's for you to set the level of your monitors in your room to the appropriate loudness based on this K metering system so that you're hearing the audio at the correct volume that you like to listen to or like to master at, to make sure that you get your song to the 0 setting, I guess. And that's the gist of the plugin there. Obviously, I didn't understand everything in here, but, other than that, most of the controls are fairly obvious. There's some very detailed functions here, as I stated. You've also got some preset options. You've got some banks and, A/B comparisons. We've got, some presets here that can give you, a bit of a guide. So like CD Master 1, this is the settings they've put it to. So they've moved over to the K14 system. They're showing that stuff there. Again, as I always state, it doesn't know how loud your audio signal was in the first place. So please note that if you use these presets, you will have to adjust your input. So whereas with a compressor, you should adjust your threshold when you use one of their presets to get it to a more appropriate compression level, because they don't know how loud your audio is. Same applies here. They don't know how loud your audio is, so they may be boosting the audio too much, and it doesn't need that, which is exactly what they're doing here, because it's over compressing significantly right now. So I would be backing this down a hell of a lot. Maybe even more than that, Obviously, if you want to get some reduction going, you'll need to push it up. And it's going to depend on your audio material. How much limiting do you need to do? And that's going to depend on how much compression and limiting you've already done in previous stages of the process. But they obviously give you plenty of, examples here to guide you on what you can do with this and what you may or may not want to set to. They're changing the dither settings here. So for DVD, they've set it to 24-bit. They've changed the noise shape. If we were on our CD one that we were on, we're 16. We've got a B shape here. Go to Master 2. Again, they're changing some of these settings here as well. They've moved over to a C shape. Different things here to try out and experiment with. But it's a very detailed plugin. As you can see, very powerful. And it may be the limiter you need in your mastering sessions going forward. So definitely go and check it out if you're interested in this and you want to try it out on your stuff to see the real detail, the real accuracy of this and how it sounds on your system in your studio or home studio or wherever you are working.
All right, so there you go. That is the Xenon from PSP. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd love to hear from you and try to help where I can. Definitely go to PSP's website, check out all their plugins, get a demo of whatever you like, and try them out. And let me know what you think of some of their plugins. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. All of your support is greatly appreciated, as it allows me to continue to provide this information to you and these videos to hopefully help you through your musical journey. Hopefully the video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.